The storm came without warning that September night in 1882, turning the Wyoming prairie into a churning sea of mud and darkness. Lightning split the sky like God's own whip, illuminating the grasslands in brief. Terrible flashes before plunging everything back into blackness. The rain fell in sheets so thick a man couldn't see his hand before his face. June Whitaker pressed herself against the rough bark of a cottonwood tree, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. 22 years old and running for her life. She'd left everything behind 3 hours ago. Her uncle's ranch, her few possessions, and any pretense of being the obedient niece he'd tried to make her into. Her boots squelched in the mud as she pushed forward, searching desperately for shelter in the storm-torn night. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at her sodden hair and whipping it across her face. She'd lost her bonnet somewhere back near Miller's Creek, along with most of her pins. Now her dark hair hung loose and wild, making her look like some spirit of the storm itself. But June was no spirit. She was flesh and blood, cold and afraid, with nowhere to go except away from the man who called himself family. Her uncle, Silas Whitaker, had taken her in when she was 14, after her parents died of fever, for 8 years. She'd kept his house, cooked his meals, and endured his harsh words and harsher hands. But when he told her 2 days ago that she was to marry Ezra Hutchinson, a man 30 years her senior with dead eyes and bloodied knuckles, something inside her had finally broken. "You'll do as you're told, girl," Silas had said, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Hutchinson's offering good money for you, and that land deed of your daddy's will finally be put to use." The land. Always it came back to the land. 40 acres her father had claimed before he died, right where the railroad company was planning to build their new line. Worth a fortune now, but legally hers only when she turned 25 or married with her guardian's consent. Silas had found a way around that inconvenience. Another lightning flash revealed a structure ahead, a barn or stable, abandoned by the look of it. June stumbled toward it, her frozen fingers barely able to grip the wooden door as she pulled it open. The hinges shrieked in protest, but she slipped inside, grateful for even this meager shelter. The barn smelled of old hay and leather, with that particular mustiness of a place long unused. June stood dripping in the doorway, trying to catch her breath. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably, and she wrapped her arms around herself, though it did little good. Every stitch of clothing she wore was soaked through. She felt her way deeper into the barn, hands outstretched in the darkness. There had to be something here, old horse blankets, feed sacks, anything to ward off the cold. Her fingers found a rough wooden post, then another. Stalls. She realized this had been a proper stable once. Thunder crashed overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the very ground. June cried out involuntarily, pressing herself into a corner. She'd always hated storms, ever since she was little. Her mother used to hold her during the bad ones, singing soft songs about sunshine and morning. But her mother was 8 years in the ground, and June had no one now. No one at all. She was just beginning to think she might survive the night when she heard it, the creak of a floorboard that had nothing to do with the storm. June froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Someone else was in the barn. "Who's there?" The voice was deep, controlled, with that particular drawl of a man who'd spent his life on the range. "Show yourself, before I assume you're here to steal what little I've got left." June's mind raced. She could run, but where? Back into the storm. She'd die of cold before morning. She could hide, but he'd already heard her. There was nothing for it but to step forward and hope this stranger was kinder than the men she'd left behind. "Please," she called out, her voice shaking. "I'm not here to steal anything. I just needed to get out of the storm." A match flared in the darkness, revealing a man's face, weathered and hard, with dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long duster that had seen better days. A rancher, by the look of him, though not a wealthy one. He touched the match to a lantern hanging from a beam. and warm yellow light flooded the space. Well, well. His eyes traveled over her sodden form, taking in her ruined dress and wild hair. You're a long way from anywhere civilized, Miss. These parts aren't safe for a woman alone. I know. June lifted her chin, trying for dignity despite her chattering teeth. But staying where I was would have been worse. The man, he looked to be in his 30s, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days, studied her for a long moment. His expression gave nothing away. You running from the law? He asked finally. No, sir. From a husband, then. I have no husband. Then from what? June hesitated. How could she explain that her own bloodkin had sold her like cattle, that she'd rather freeze to death on the prairie than share a bed with Ezra Hutchinson? The truth sounded sordid even in her own mind. From men who meant me harm, she said simply. Something shifted in the stranger's face, not quite sympathy, but understanding, perhaps. He reached for something behind him and tossed it to her. A blanket, rough but dry. Name's Cole Travern, he said. This is my land you're on. That barn you're standing in belongs to my ranch. June's heart sank. Of course, she'd traded one danger for another. But when she looked up to apologize, to beg his forbearance, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not desire or calculation, but a kind of wary assessment, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle. June, she offered, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. June Whitaker. Recognition flared in his eyes. Whitaker, you're Silas Whitaker's niece, the one he's been trying to marry off to that snake Hutchinson. June nodded miserably. So her shame was already common knowledge in the county. And you ran. It wasn't a question. Cole Travern leaned back against a stall door, crossing his arms. In the middle of the worst storm we've had all year, must have been some powerful motivation. You don't know my uncle, June said quietly. Or Mr. Hutchinson. I know them both well enough. Hutchinson's bought 3 ranches in the last 2 years, all from men who couldn't pay their debts. Funny how those debts always seem to come due right after he took an interest in their land. Cole's expression darkened. And your uncle's been buying drinks at Murphy's saloon for weeks, bragging about the deal he's making. Lightning flashed again, followed immediately by thunder. June flinched, and Cole's eyes softened just a fraction. Storm's getting worse, he said. This barn's not much shelter. The roof leaks in 3 places and the wind comes through the cracks. My house is just over that ridge. You can wait out the weather there if you're willing. June looked at this stranger, this man who could be her salvation or her doom, and tried to read his intentions. But Cole Travern's face was like the prairie itself, giving nothing away. Why would you help me? She asked. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, maybe because I remember what it's like to have nowhere to run. Maybe because I've got no love for men who trade in misery. Or maybe, he shrugged. Maybe I just don't like the idea of finding a frozen woman in my barn come morning. Bad for the horse's temperament. Despite everything, June almost smiled. I accept your offer, Mr. Travern, and I'm grateful for it. He nodded, pushing away from the stall. We'll have to make a run for it. House is about a 1/4 mile. You up for it? June thought of her uncle, probably assembling a search party even now. Of Hutchinson with his cold eyes and grasping hands. Of the marriage certificate that would sign away not just her freedom but her father's land, her inheritance, her future. I'm up for it, she said. Cole extinguished the lantern, plunging them back into darkness. Take my hand, he said. Ground's uneven and the mud's knee-deep in places. Don't let go, no matter what. June felt his hand close around hers, calloused and strong. The hand of a man who worked the land instead of scheming to steal it. Together they pushed out into the storm, the wind immediately trying to tear them apart. But Cole's grip was sure, and June held on as if her life depended on it. Which, she reflected as they struggled through the tempest toward the promise of shelter. It very well might. The journey to Cole's house felt endless. Rain lashed at them from all directions, and the wind seemed determined to tear June from his grasp. Twice she stumbled, her boots catching in the thick mud. But each time Cole's steady hand pulled her upright. Lightning illuminated their path in terrifying bursts, showing a landscape transformed into something wild and alien. When they finally reached the house, a modest but solid structure built into the lee of a hill, June could barely stand. Her legs shook with exhaustion and cold, and her fingers had gone numb despite Cole's warm grip. He shouldered the door open against the wind and pulled her inside. The sudden absence of rain and wind left her ears ringing. June stood dripping on the threshold, blinking in the dim interior. Cole moved with practiced ease in the darkness, and soon a lamp flared to life, revealing a simple but clean main room. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold now but promising warmth. "Stay there," Cole said, already moving toward the hearth. "I'll get a fire going." June watched him work, noting the economy of his movements. This was a man who wasted nothing, not time, not effort, not words. Within minutes, flames were licking at kindling, and the promise of heat made her realize just how cold she truly was. "You're shaking like a leaf," Cole observed, adding larger logs to the growing fire. "There's a room through there where you can change. My sister left some clothes last time she visited. They should fit well enough." June hesitated. "Your sister?" "Lives in Cheyenne now. Married a shopkeeper." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "She'd box my ears if she knew I'd let a woman stand here freezing while I tended the fire." "Go on." The room he indicated was small but neat, with a narrow bed and a washstand. June found a simple calico dress and undergarments in a trunk at the foot of the bed. Everything smelled of lavender sachet and disuse. She peeled off her sodden clothes with fingers that barely worked, noting with dismay how her skin had gone pale as chalk. When she emerged, feeling almost human again despite the dress being a touch too long. Cole had pulled 2 chairs close to the fire. Steam rose from a pot on a trivet over the flames. "Coffee," he said without looking up. "Nothing fancy, but it's hot." June sank into the offered chair, extending her hands toward the blessed warmth. For several minutes they sat in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. The firelight cast dancing shadows on Cole's face, highlighting the planes and angles weathered by sun and wind. "Thank you," June said finally. "You likely saved my life tonight." Cole poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handing her one. Maybe not. You strike me as tougher than you look, Miss Whitaker." "Just June, please." He nodded, settling back in his chair. "All right. June, now that you're not about to freeze to death, you want to tell me what really sent you running into a storm like this must have been more than just not wanting to marry Hutchinson." June wrapped her hands around the hot cup, letting its warmth seep into her bones. How much to tell this stranger who'd shown her kindness? But then, what did she have to lose now? "My uncle wants my father's land," she said quietly. 40 acres out near Lodgepole Creek. It wasn't worth much when Papa claimed it, but now the railroad's coming through." Cole finished. "I heard the rumors. That land's going to be worth a fortune to whoever holds the deed." "The deed's in my name, but I can't claim it until I'm 25, unless I marry." June's voice turned bitter. "Then my husband would control it?" "Uncle Silas made a deal with Hutchinson. My hand in marriage for a share of the profits when they sell to the railroad." Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Your uncle's a fool if he thinks Hutchinson will share anything once he's got what he wants." "I tried to tell him that. He struck me for my trouble." June touched her cheek unconsciously, where the bruise had finally faded. "Said I should be grateful any man would have me, considering I've no dowry but the clothes on my back. The land's not dowry enough. The land is why Hutchinson wants me. Without it, I'm just another mouth to feed." She took a sip of coffee, welcoming its bitter warmth. "I heard them talking 2 nights ago. Hutchinson said once we were married, he'd make sure I understood my place. Said he'd had experience breaking wild fillies before. Cole's jaw tightened, and his knuckles went white around his cup. Man talks about a woman that way ought to be horsewhipped. Thunder crashed overhead. So close the windows rattled. June jumped, coffee sloshing in her cup. The next instant, lightning struck somewhere nearby, the flash and boom simultaneous, overwhelming. Without thinking, June was on her feet, the cup falling from her nerveless fingers. "It's all right," Cole said, rising too. "Lightning hit the old oak out front, by the sound of it. We're safe inside." But June wasn't listening. The terror of the storm, the exhaustion of her flight, the strange unreality of being here in this man's house, it all crashed over her at once. She was shaking again, but not from cold this time. When Cole reached out to steady her, she moved without conscious thought. Her arms went around his neck, and she pressed herself against his solid warmth. For a heartbeat, he stood frozen, his hands hovering uncertainly. Then she lifted her face to his and kissed him. It wasn't a romantic kiss. It was desperate, almost violent in its need. A drowning woman grasping for something solid in a world gone mad. She tasted coffee in surprise on his lips, felt the shocked intake of his breath. His hands came up to her shoulders, whether to push her away or pull her closer. She couldn't tell. The kiss lasted only seconds before June's senses returned. She jerked back, mortified by her own actions. Cole still held her shoulders, his dark eyes unreadable in the firelight. "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I don't know what... I'm sorry." He released her slowly. "Step back. Storm's got everyone rattled tonight," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "No harm done." But June could see the way he rubbed his jaw, as if trying to erase the sensation of her lips. Shame flooded through her. What must he think of her now, running from one man straight into the arms of another? "It wasn't like that," she said desperately. "I wasn't trying to trade on your kindness. When the lightning struck, I was so frightened. And you were there, and I—" "June," his voice was gentle but firm. "You don't owe me an explanation. You've been through hell tonight. People do things they wouldn't normally when they're scared and exhausted." She sank back into her chair, covering her face with her hands. "You must think I'm no better than what my uncle says, a wild thing that needs breaking." "I think nothing of the sort." Cole knelt to clean up the spilled coffee, his movements matter of fact. "I think you're a young woman who's been pushed to the breaking point and acted on instinct. Nothing more, nothing less." When he straightened, June forced herself to meet his eyes. Hutchinson would have taken that kiss as permission for more. "I'm not Hutchinson." There was steel in his voice now. "And you're safe here, June, from the storm, from your uncle, from Hutchinson, from me, too. If you're worried about it, I've got no interest in taking what's not freely given." The honesty in his words, the simple decency of them, made tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time a man had shown her such respect? "Why are you helping me?" she asked again. "Really, not the answer you gave in the barn. The truth." Cole returned to his chair, staring into the fire. The storm continued its assault outside, but here in this small circle of warmth and light, there was a strange peace. "My mother ran once," he said finally. "When I was 12, my father was a hard man, drank too much, used his fists too freely. One night she packed what she could carry and took me and my sister in the middle of the night. We made it as far as the next county before he caught up with us." June's heart clenched. "What happened?" "A rancher took us in, fed us, gave us shelter, stood between my father and mother when he came calling. Told him he'd have to go through him to get to us." Cole's smile was grim. "My father was mean, but he wasn't stupid. He knew when he was outmatched." "Did your mother stay with the rancher?" "No, she went back eventually. Said it was her duty." The bitterness in his voice was old but still sharp. She died 2 years later. Doctor said it was pneumonia, but I knew better. She just gave up. They sat in silence again, the fire crackling between them. June understood now. Cole wasn't just offering shelter. He was offering the protection no one had given his mother, the second chance she'd never taken. "I won't go back," June said quietly. "No matter what, I'll die first." "No one's dying on my watch," Cole said firmly. "We'll figure out what to do come morning. For now, you need rest. Take the bedroom. I'll bunk out here by the fire." June started to protest, but exhaustion was pulling at her like lead weights. The kiss still burned on her lips, a moment of madness in an insane night. But Cole had shown her grace, hadn't tried to take advantage. In a world full of men like her uncle and Hutchinson, she'd found one good one, even if she'd ruined any chance of respect with her desperate actions. "Thank you," she said again, meaning so much more than just the shelter. Cole nodded, already arranging blankets on the floor. "Get some sleep, June. Tomorrow will come soon enough, and we'll need clear heads to face it." As June made her way to the bedroom, she paused in the doorway. "Cole, what was the rancher's name? The one who helped your mother?" He looked up, surprised by the question. "Samuel Creed. Why, I'd like to remember it," she said softly. "The name of a good man. There seem to be so few of them." Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. "Get some rest," he said again, but his voice was gentler now. June closed the bedroom door and sank onto the narrow bed. Outside, the storm continued its fury, but she felt strangely safe. She'd stolen a kiss from a stranger in her moment of terror, but instead of taking advantage, he'd offered her dignity and protection. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Her uncle would come looking. Hutchinson wouldn't give up easily. The fight for her father's land had only begun. But tonight, she was warm and dry and safe. And for now, that was miracle enough. As sleep finally claimed her, June's last thought was of Cole Travern standing between her and the storm, solid as the mountains themselves. She'd kissed him in fear and desperation, but somehow, in that brief moment, she'd felt something else entirely. Something that had nothing to do with terror and everything to do with the way he'd held her, careful and protective, as if she were something precious rather than a burden to bear. Tomorrow would come, as he'd said, but tonight, June Whitaker slept without fear for the first time in months. While a good man kept watch by the fire, the storm had blown itself out by morning, leaving the world washed clean and gleaming under a pale sun. June woke to the sound of activity outside, the ring of an axe on wood, the lowing of cattle. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was. Then memory flooded back the flight through the storm, Cole Travern's steady hands, and that desperate, foolish kiss. She dressed quickly in her borrowed clothes, finger-combing her tangled hair as best she could. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found coffee warming on the stove and bread laid out on the table, but no sign of Cole. Through the window, she could see him working near the barn, clearing debris left by the storm. June poured herself coffee and stood watching him work. In daylight, she could see more clearly what kind of man had taken her in. His ranch was small but well kept, everything in good repair despite signs of hard use. A man who took care of what was his, who worked with his hands rather than scheming for what belonged to others. She was still standing there when Cole came in, bringing the scent of fresh air and honest work with him. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of her in his sister's dress, hair loose around her shoulders. "Morning," he said simply. "Storm did some damage to the chicken coop. Been trying to patch it before the foxes figure out there's an easy meal to be had." "I could help," June offered. "I'm good with my hands. Had to be, keeping my uncle's place running." Cole studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'd appreciate it. But first, we need to talk about what comes next. Your uncle will have men out looking by now. This is one of the first places they'll check." June's stomach tightened. In the safety of Cole's house. She'd almost forgotten the danger waiting outside. "You want me to leave?" "I want you to be smart about this." Cole poured his own coffee and sat at the table. "Running only works if you've got somewhere to run to. You got any kin besides your uncle friends who might take you in?" "No one." June sank into the chair across from him. "My mother's family disowned her when she married beneath them. My father's people are all gone, and Uncle Silas made sure I had no friends. Said it wasn't proper for a young woman to be gallivanting about." "What about legal recourse? That land is rightfully yours." "I tried that. Judge Harlan is drinking buddies with my uncle. Said a young woman clearly couldn't manage property on her own. That my uncle was doing his Christian duty in finding me a suitable husband." June's laugh was bitter. Suitable. Hutchinson's had 2 wives already. Both died young. And there were whispers about how— Cole's expression darkened. "I heard those whispers too." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of June's situation settling between them like a stone. Then Cole spoke, his voice careful and measured. "There's another option, not an easy one, and you might not like it, but it would keep you safe and secure your land both." June looked up, hope and wariness warring in her chest. "What option?" "Marriage, to someone other than Hutchinson. Someone who'd respect the bargain for what it is, protection for you, a working partnership. Nothing more expected or demanded." The words hung in the air between them. June felt heat rise to her cheeks as she understood his meaning. "You're offering—" "I'm suggesting it as a practical solution." Cole's voice remained steady, businesslike. "I've got this ranch, small as it is. You've got land that'll be worth something soon. Together, we'd have enough to build something decent. Apart, you're vulnerable and I'm barely scraping by." June's mind raced. Marriage to a near stranger. A man she'd known less than a day. But then, what was Hutchinson but a stranger too? At least Cole had shown her kindness, respect. He hadn't taken advantage when she'd thrown herself at him in the storm. "What about expectations?" she asked carefully. "What would you want from such an arrangement?" "A partner," Cole said simply. "Someone to share the work and the decisions. Your land would remain yours. I'd want that in writing. As for the rest—" He paused, choosing his words. "I'm not the kind of man who takes what isn't offered freely. You'd have your own room, your own space. If something more developed over time, well, that would be between us to decide. But I wouldn't expect it or demand it." June studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. But Cole Treverne's expression remained open, honest. He was offering her exactly what he said, a business arrangement. Protection, respect. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "What's in it for you? Really?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "Truth. I'm 35 years old. June. I've spent the last 10 years building this place up from nothing, working sunrise to sunset just to keep ahead of the bank. I'm tired of doing it alone. Having a partner, someone with a stake in making this work, that's worth something to me. And keeping you out of Hutchinson's hands feels like the right thing to do." "Because of your mother?" "Partly." He met her eyes directly. "But also because I've watched Hutchinson destroy everything he touches. That land of yours, he wouldn't just sell it to the railroad. He'd use the money to buy up more ranches, push out more families. Man like that getting more power is bad for everyone." June found herself nodding slowly. Everything he said made sense. And yet, "I need to think," she said. "Of course." Cole stood, reaching for his hat. "I'll be working on that chicken coop if you want to help. Either way, you're welcome here as long as you need. The offer stands, but there's no pressure to accept it." He headed for the door, then paused. "June, about last night, that kiss, I want you to know, that doesn't factor into this. What I'm offering stands regardless, and if you stay, I won't expect a repeat, just so we're clear." Then he was gone. leaving June alone with her tumultuous thoughts. She sat for a long while, weighing her options. Return to her uncle, never. Try to run farther with no money and nowhere to go. She wouldn't last a week. Wait 3 more years to claim her inheritance. Hutchinson would find her long before then. Or marry Cole Travern, trade one set of chains for another, but lighter ones. Chains of her own choosing, with a man who promised respect, if nothing else. June rose and went to the window. She could see Cole working, his movements steady and sure. He'd rolled up his sleeves, and she could see the strength in his arms, the competence in every motion. A man who worked instead of schemed, who offered partnership instead of ownership. Before she could lose her nerve, June stepped outside. The morning air was cool and fresh, the sky washed clean by the storm. Cole looked up as she approached, squinting against the sun. "Thought about it?" he asked, straightforward as always. "I have conditions," June said, lifting her chin. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "Let's hear them." "First, the land stays in my name. You put that in writing, like you said. Second, I want to learn the ranching business proper, not just women's work, everything. If I'm to be a partner, I want to be a real one." "Agreed. What else?" June took a breath. "If we do this, we do it legal and proper. In town, with witnesses. I won't have anyone saying it wasn't valid later." "Smart thinking. Anything else?" Here, June hesitated, then forged ahead. "About the other... What happened last night? I need you to know that wasn't who I am. I'm not loose or forward. I was frightened and not myself." "I know that," Cole said quietly. "Like I said, it doesn't factor in. But I need to say this." June met his eyes steadily. "If we marry, I'll be a good wife to you in every way I can. I'll work hard, keep your house, be your partner in building something here. And maybe, in time, if trust grows between us, well, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of more. But it would have to be earned, on both sides." Cole nodded slowly. "That's fair, more than fair, considering you barely know me." "Then..." June's voice caught, but she pressed on. "Then yes, I accept your offer. Cole Travern, God help us both." For the first time since she'd met him, Cole smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. "All right then, we'd best get to town before your uncle figures out where you are. Judge Harlan can't refuse to marry us if we're both willing. And once it's done, you'll be under my protection legally. You want to go now today?" "No point in waiting, unless you're having second thoughts." June thought of Hutchinson's cold eyes, of her uncle's harsh hands, of 3 more years of hiding and running. No second thoughts. "But Cole, I should ask, are you certain about this? You're giving up a lot too, the chance to marry for love, have a normal life." Cole's smile turned wry. "Normal's never been in the cards for me. June, as for love, well, I've seen what people call love, and mostly it looks like ownership. What we're talking about. Respect, partnership, building something together. That seems more honest to me." He was right, June realized. What they were proposing might not be romantic, but it was real, practical, and in this hard land, sometimes practical was worth more than all the poetry in the world. "I'll get my things," she said, "what little there is." "June!" Cole's voice stopped her. "You might want to pin your hair up. We show up in town with you looking like that. People will talk more than they already will." June touched her loose hair, embarrassed. "I lost my pins in the storm. My sister left some. Check the dresser in the bedroom." He paused, then added, "And June, once we do this, I'll stand by it. No matter what your uncle or Hutchinson try, you'll be under my protection. I keep my promises." "I believe you," June said softly. And surprisingly, she did. This man she'd known less than a day had shown her more honest dealing than her own blood kin. As she turned to go inside, Cole called after her, For what it's worth, I think you're brave. Not many women would have run into that storm. Fewer still would have the courage to accept an offer like mine. Or the desperation, June said with a weak smile. No. Cole's voice was firm. Courage. Don't sell yourself short. June Whitaker. You're stronger than you know. June carried those words with her as she went inside to prepare. In an hour, maybe two, she'd be June Travern, a married woman, tied to a man she barely knew, banking everything on his promise of respect and partnership. But as she pinned up her hair with trembling fingers, June realized she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Cole had offered her shelter from the storm, not just last night's tempest, but the one that had been building around her for years. When she emerged, ready to face whatever came next, Cole was waiting with the wagon. He helped her up onto the seat, his touch careful and respectful as always. Ready? He asked. June looked back at the small ranch house that had been her sanctuary, then ahead to the unknown future waiting for her. Ready? She said, and meant it. As they drove toward town and the new life waiting there, June allowed herself one moment to remember that desperate kiss in the storm. Whatever else happened, she'd always have that. The memory of a moment when she'd acted on pure instinct, reaching for warmth and strength and finding both. And now she was choosing to bind herself to that strength in a different way. Not with passion, but with purpose. Not with romance, but with respect. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to build something good and true and lasting. The door to her old life was closing, but Cole Travern had opened a new one, and June stepped through it with her head high and her courage gathered around her like armor. Whatever came next, she would meet it as a partner, not a possession. The lock had turned, but this time, she held the key. The first days of marriage passed in a careful dance of courtesy and distance, true to his word. Cole had given June the bedroom while he slept in the main room. They worked side by side during the day, June learning the rhythms of ranch life, Cole teaching with patience she hadn't expected. But when evening came, they retreated to their separate spaces, the weight of their hasty decision hanging between them like an invisible wall. It was the fourth night when June found herself unable to sleep. She could hear Cole moving about in the main room, the quiet clink of dishes, the scrape of a chair. Finally, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and ventured out. Cole sat at the table, a lamp casting warm light over scattered papers. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Couldn't sleep, he asked. Too much thinking. June moved closer, noting the ledgers spread before him. Ranch accounts. Such as they are. His smile was rueful. Numbers aren't my strong suit, but they don't lie either. Things are tight. June hesitated, then pulled out the chair across from him. May I? At his nod, she sat, pulling one of the ledgers closer. Her father had taught her figures, one of the few gifts he'd had time to give before the fever took him. She studied Cole's careful entries, noting the narrow margins, the delicate balance between survival and failure. You're barely breaking even, she observed. Been a hard year, lost some cattle to disease, had to repair the barn after a storm worse than the one that brought you here. Cole rubbed his eyes tiredly. But we'll manage, always do. We, June repeated softly. You keep saying that. We're married, aren't we? Your problems are mine now. Works both ways. June felt something ease in her chest. Then let me help with this. I'm good with numbers. My father was a bookkeeper before he tried his hand at ranching. They worked in companionable silence for a while, June reorganizing the accounts while Cole explained the various expenses and income sources. It was strangely intimate, this sharing of worries and plans by lamplight. There, June said finally, showing him her neat columns. If we cut back here and here, and if the cattle prices hold steady, we should have enough to get through winter without touching the savings. Cole studied her work, nodding slowly. That's clever. I never thought to organize it that way." He looked up at her, and in the lamplight, she could see something new in his expression. Respect, yes, but something warmer too. "Thank you. It's what partners do," June said, echoing his earlier words. They sat quietly for a moment, the lamp flame flickering between them. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, answered by another. The sound used to frighten June, but now it just seemed part of the night's music. "Can I ask you something?" Cole said suddenly. "Why didn't you ever marry before now, a man like you, with your own land, steady ways? There must have been opportunities." Cole leaned back in his chair, considering. "There were a few who showed interest, but I never could see the point of marrying just to marry. Figured if I was going to bind my life to someone, it should mean something more than just convenience or convention." "But ours is convenience," June pointed out. "Is it?" Cole's gaze was steady on hers. "Seems to me we're building something here. Maybe not what folks usually call marriage, but something real all the same." June felt heat rise to her cheeks and looked down at the ledgers. "I suppose we are. You're different than I expected," Cole continued. "When I first saw you in that barn, looking like a drowned cat, I figured you for another spoiled rancher's niece who'd wilt at the first sign of hard work. But you've taken to everything I've shown you. Never complained once." "Complaining doesn't get the work done," June said simply. "Besides, this is different from my uncle's place. There, I worked because I had no choice. Here—" She paused, searching for words. "Here, the work means something. We're building something together, like you said." Cole smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "My mother would have liked you. She always said the best marriages were partnerships first, romance second." "Was that how it was with your parents before things went bad?" "For a while, maybe. But my father never saw her as a partner. Just another piece of property, like his horses or his land." The old bitterness crept back into Cole's voice. "I swore I'd never be that kind of man." "You're not," June said with quiet conviction. "These past days have shown me that." Their eyes met and held across the table. Something shifted in the air between them, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't the desperate passion of that night in the storm, but something steadier, built on shared work and growing respect. "It's late," Cole said finally. Though he made no move to rise, "You should get some rest." June nodded, but found herself reluctant to leave the warm circle of lamplight. "Cole, thank you for everything. I know this isn't what you planned for your life either." "Plans change," he said philosophically. "Sometimes for the better." The next morning brought the first real test of their arrangement. June was feeding the chickens when she heard horses approaching. Her heart lurched as she recognized the lead rider, her Uncle Silas, with Hutchinson beside him and two rough-looking men she didn't know bringing up the rear. "Cole," she called, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Company?" Cole emerged from the barn, taking in the situation with a quick glance. He moved to stand beside June, not touching but close enough that she could feel his solid presence. "Gentlemen," Cole said evenly as the riders pulled up. "Something I can help you with." Silas's face was mottled with rage. "You know damn well why we're here. Travern. You've got something that belongs to me." "If you're referring to my wife, you're mistaken," Cole replied. "June belongs to no one but herself." "Wife?" Hutchinson's cold eyes narrowed. "That's not possible. She was promised to me." "Promises you made to each other, maybe, but June made no such promise." Cole's hand moved casually to rest on the fence post near where his rifle leaned. "We were married legal and proper 4 days ago. Judge Harlan can confirm it if you've a mind to check." "You had no right," Silas spat. "She's my ward." "Was your ward," June interrupted, finding her courage. "I'm of age and married now. Uncle, you have no claim on me anymore." "What about my claim?" Hutchinson leaned forward in his saddle. "Your uncle owes me for the arrangement we made, I put out good money. Then take it up with him, Cole said flatly. No concern of ours what bargains you made over whiskey and cards. One of the rough men shifted restlessly. We doing this the easy way or the hard way, boss? The threat hung in the air like smoke. June felt Cole tense beside her, ready for violence if it came. But Hutchinson held up a hand. No need for unpleasantness. Yet, his smile was cold as winter wind. But this isn't over. Travern, that land the girl inherited. Is her land free and clear? Cole interrupted. And it'll stay that way. We'll see about that. Hutchinson's gaze shifted to June. You think you're clever. Girl, running to the first man who'd have you. But you don't know Cole Travern like I do. Ask him about the Baxter place sometime. Ask him why Tom Baxter's widow had to sell out and move back east. With that, he wheeled his horse around. The others followed, Silas shooting June one last venomous look before they rode away. June waited until they were out of sight before letting out the breath she'd been holding. What did he mean about the Baxter place? Cole's jaw was tight. Tom Baxter was a friend. Died 2 winters back when his horse threw him. I tried to help his widow keep the ranch going, but she didn't have the heart for it after Tom died, when she decided to sell and go back to her people. Hutchinson was the only one with ready cash. But he made it sound like I had something to do with her leaving. That's Hutchinson's way. Plant doubt, spread poison, see what grows. Cole turned to face her. I'll tell you plain. June, I offered to marry Sarah Baxter too. Same kind of arrangement as ours. She turned me down. Said she couldn't bear to stay where everything reminded her of Tom. I respected her choice. June searched his face, finding only honesty there. I believe you. Do you? Cole's expression softened. Because if this is going to work between us, we need trust. They'll be back, and they'll try other ways to drive a wedge between us. Then we don't let them. June surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. Uncle Silas had 8 years to poison my mind against the world, and I still found the courage to run. Hutchinson doesn't scare me. Not anymore. He should, Cole said seriously. He's dangerous. June, more dangerous than your uncle ever was. We need to be careful. That evening, as they prepared supper together, June found herself watching Cole with new eyes. The threat from Hutchinson had crystallized something for her. This man, this quiet, steady man who'd taken her in and offered her protection, was standing between her and real danger. The least she could do was stand with him in return. I've been thinking, she said as they sat down to eat, about the sleeping arrangements. Cole looked up sharply. If you're uncomfortable. No, that's not it. June took a breath. It seems foolish, us acting like strangers when we need to present a united front to the world. Maybe we should act more like a married couple, at least in the house. What are you suggesting? June felt heat rise to her cheeks, but pressed on. I'm not suggesting, that is, I don't mean. She stopped, frustrated with her own tongue-tied state. I mean, maybe we could share the main room in the evenings, talk more, get to know each other better. If we're going to convince others we're truly married, we should at least be comfortable in each other's company. Cole considered this. That makes sense. And June, I want you to know, Hutchinson's words aside, I have no ulterior motives here. What we agreed to stands. I know, June said softly. And she did know. Whatever else Cole Travern was, he was a man of his word. That night, instead of retreating to her room after supper, June brought out some mending and sat by the fire. Cole seemed uncertain at first, but eventually settled into his own chair with a harness that needed repair. They worked in companionable silence, the fire crackling between them. It was domestic, peaceful in a way June had never experienced in her uncle's house. There, evenings had been tense affairs, waiting to see what mood Silas would be in, whether the whiskey would make him mean or maudlin. Tell me about the ranch, June said eventually. How you built it up? So Cole told her. his voice quiet in the firelit room. He spoke of buying the land cheap because no one else wanted it, of the backbreaking work of the first years, of small victories and large setbacks. June found herself drawn into his stories, asking questions, offering observations. "You've done something remarkable here," she said when he finished. "Built something from nothing through sheer will." "Not nothing," Cole corrected. "Had help along the way. That rancher I mentioned, Samuel Creed. He taught me what I needed to know, gave me my start. Man believed in paying kindness forward." "Like you're doing with me." Cole looked at her across the fire. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just being selfish, wanting a partner to share the load." "Either way," June said, "I'm grateful." They lapsed into comfortable silence again. When June finally rose to retire, she paused at her bedroom door. "Cole, this was nice, talking like this." "It was," he agreed. "Same time tomorrow night." "I'd like that." As she lay in bed, June reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. A week ago, she'd been a virtual prisoner in her uncle's house, facing a fate worse than death with Hutchinson. Now she was married to a man she barely knew. Yet already she felt more at home here than she ever had with blood kin. The door Cole had locked behind her that first night hadn't been a prison. It had been a sanctuary. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something good behind that door. Something based on trust and respect and shared purpose. It wasn't the marriage she'd dreamed of as a girl, full of romance and passion, but it was real, and it was hers. And that was more than she'd dared hope for when she'd fled into the storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hutchinson wouldn't give up easily. And there was still the matter of securing her land officially. But tonight, she was safe and warm, with a partner standing guard against the darkness. And that, June thought as sleep claimed her, was no small thing in this hard country. No small thing at all. 2 weeks into their marriage, June had settled into the rhythm of ranch life with surprising ease. She rose before dawn to help with chores, learned to read the weather in cloud formations, and discovered muscles she didn't know existed. The work was hard but satisfying in a way her life at her uncle's had never been. It was a Tuesday morning when Frank Morrison rode up to the ranch. June recognized him as one of the neighboring ranchers, a man with kind eyes and work-worn hands. She was hanging laundry when he arrived, Cole coming from the barn to greet him. "Frank," Cole said, extending his hand. "What brings you out this way?" Morrison's face was grim as he dismounted. "Thought you should know. Cole, there's been talk in town. Hutchinson's been spreading stories about your marriage, saying it ain't legitimate, that you took advantage of a confused young woman." June's hands stilled on the wet shirt she was holding. Cole's expression darkened, but his voice remained calm. "Let him talk. We were married legal and proper." "I know that, and so does anyone with sense. But Hutchinson's got Judge Harlan's ear, and there's rumor of him challenging the marriage in court. Says Miss June here wasn't in her right mind when she agreed to it, being distraught from running away and all." "That's a lie," June said, stepping forward. "I knew exactly what I was doing." Morrison tipped his hat to her. "I believe you, ma'am. Just thought you should know what's being said. Hutchinson's also been asking questions about that land of yours, trying to find some way to challenge your inheritance." After Morrison left, Cole was quiet, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. June watched him pace the porch, noting the tension in his shoulders. "We knew this would happen," she said finally. "Hutchinson doesn't give up easily." "No, he doesn't." Cole stopped pacing, turning to face her. "June, I need you to understand something. If he takes this to court, things could get ugly. He'll drag your name through the mud, say whatever he needs to say to get what he wants. If you want to leave, go somewhere he can't find you." "No?" The word came out sharper than June intended. "I'm not running anymore. Cole, this is my home now. Our home. I won't let him drive me from it." Something flickered in Cole's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or admiration. All right then, we fight, but we fight smart. First thing is to shore up our position. Make sure there's no question about the validity of our marriage. That evening, they had unexpected visitors. Mary Patterson, the minister's wife, arrived with 2 other women from town, bearing a cake and wearing determined smiles. "We've come to welcome the new Mrs. Travern properly," Mary announced, bustling into the house with proprietary confidence. "Should have come sooner, but we wanted to give you time to settle in." June shot Cole a panicked look. The house was clean but sparse, clearly showing the lack of a woman's long-time touch. But Cole just gave her a small nod of encouragement before excusing himself to the barn. The women settled in the main room, their sharp eyes taking in every detail. June served coffee with hands that wanted to tremble, acutely aware of her work-roughened palms and simple dress. "So," said Dolores Hutchinson, no relation to Ezra, despite the shared name with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Tell us how you and Cole came to marry so suddenly. Such a surprise to everyone." June had prepared for this. She and Cole had discussed what to say if questioned. It may have seemed sudden to others, but Cole and I had been corresponding for some time. When my situation with my uncle became difficult, Cole offered me the protection of his name. Corresponding, Mary Patterson leaned forward with interest. "How romantic. And here we all thought Cole would die a bachelor." "He's a good man," June said simply, "kind and steady. Any woman would be fortunate to have him." "And yet he never showed interest in any of the local girls," Dolores observed. "Turned down several good matches over the years." June met her gaze steadily. Perhaps he was waiting for the right match. The interrogation, for that's what it was, dressed up in social niceties, continued for another hour. The women asked about everything from her cooking skills to her plans for children, each question designed to probe for weakness or deception. But June had learned patience and careful speech in her uncle's house. She gave them nothing to gossip about beyond the obvious unusualness of the match. When they finally left, June sank into a chair, exhausted. Cole returned from the barn, taking in her drained expression. "That bad?" "Like being circled by wolves in petticoats," June said, "but I think I held my own." "I'm sure you did." Cole hesitated, then sat in the chair across from her. "June, about what they were probably asking, children and such. I want you to know there's no expectation there. What we have is a business arrangement." "I know." June found herself oddly disappointed by the reminder. These past weeks, working beside Cole, sharing evening conversations by the fire, she'd begun to forget the practical nature of their union. Though we may need to be more convincing as a married couple if we're to counter Hutchinson's rumors. "What do you mean?" June felt heat rise to her cheeks, but pressed on. "People will expect to see affection between us. Small things, a touch here, a look there. Right now, we act more like polite strangers than husband and wife." Cole was quiet for a long moment. "You're right, but I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or pressured." "I won't." June met his eyes. "We're partners in this. Remember, if playing the part of a loving wife helps protect what we're building here, then that's what I'll do." "All right." Cole stood, then surprised her by extending his hand. "Partners, then, in all things." June took his hand, feeling the calluses and strength there. For a moment, they stood like that, hands clasped in agreement. It felt like more than a business arrangement, though June couldn't say exactly what. The next day brought a new challenge. June was working in the vegetable garden she'd started when she heard horses approaching. This time, it wasn't Hutchinson or her uncle, but a single rider, a woman, elegantly dressed despite the dust of travel. Cole emerged from the barn as the woman dismounted. June saw him stiffen, his face going carefully neutral. "Sarah," he said, "this is unexpected." "Sarah Baxter." The widow Cole had offered to marry before June. She was beautiful in a refined way, with golden hair and delicate features that spoke of easier living than ranch life typically afforded. "Hello, Cole." Sarah's voice was soft, cultured. "I heard you'd married. I had to come see for myself." Her gaze found June, taking in her work dress and dirt-smuddened hands. Something flickered across Sarah's face. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. "Sarah, this is my wife, June, Sarah Baxter. She and her late husband were neighbors before she moved back east." "Not so far east," Sarah corrected with a small smile. "Just to Denver. Close enough to visit when I heard the news." She turned back to Cole. "Might we speak privately? There's something I need to tell you about Tom's death." June felt a flutter of unease, but kept her expression pleasant. "I'll make coffee," she offered. "You must be tired from your journey." In the kitchen, June could hear the low murmur of voices from the porch, but couldn't make out the words. She prepared the coffee with careful hands, trying not to wonder what Sarah needed to tell Cole about her husband's death, trying not to notice how beautiful and refined the other woman was. When she brought the tray out, she found Cole and Sarah sitting close together on the porch bench, Sarah's hand resting on Cole's arm. They pulled apart as June approached, but not quickly enough to hide the intimacy of the moment. "June," Cole said, and she could hear strain in his voice. "Sarah's brought some disturbing news. It seems Tom's death might not have been an accident." "What do you mean?" June set the tray down, noting how Sarah's hand lingered near Cole's. "I found papers after I moved." Sarah explained. Tom had been investigating some irregularities, cattle disappearing, brands being altered. He suspected Hutchinson was behind it. The day he died, he was riding out to meet someone who claimed to have proof. "And you think Hutchinson—" June couldn't finish the thought. "I can't prove anything," Sarah said. "But the timing seems suspicious. And now I hear Hutchinson is causing trouble for you as well." She looked between Cole and June, and something in her expression hardened. "When I heard Cole had married suddenly, right after Hutchinson started courting you, Miss Whitaker, I wondered—" "Cole, tell me truly, did you marry this girl just to spite Hutchinson?" "Sarah," Cole's voice held warning. But Sarah pressed on. "Because if you did, you're putting her in danger for your own grudge. Tom thought he could stand against Hutchinson too." "That's enough." Cole stood abruptly. "What's between June and me is our business. But I'll tell you this, I'd never put her in danger purposefully. Everything I've done has been to protect her." "The way you protected me." Sarah's voice turned bitter. "With an offer of a cold marriage bed and a business partnership." June felt the words like a slap, but she stood her ground. "Cole's offer to me was honest and honorable, more than I can say for most men's intentions." Sarah turned to study her, and June lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed by the other woman's elegance. "You're very young," Sarah said finally, "and clearly innocent of the world, but you should know what you've bound yourself to. Cole Travern is a good man, but he's not capable of love. Not the kind a woman needs. He can offer protection and partnership, but his heart, that's locked away tighter than any door." With that, she swept past them into the house to gather her things. June and Cole stood in awkward silence until she emerged again. "I'm staying at the hotel in town for a few days," Sarah announced. "If you need help with the Hutchinson matter, you know where to find me. Despite everything, Cole, I do still care about your welfare." After she rode away, Cole slumped against the porch railing. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." "Is it true?" June asked quietly. "What she said about your heart?" Cole was quiet for so long June thought he wouldn't answer. Then, after watching what supposed love did to my mother, how it kept her tied to a man who hurt her, I decided young that I wanted no part of it. Sarah, she wanted things I couldn't give. Pretty words, grand gestures, promises of forever. I could only offer what I offered you, respect, partnership, protection. And she turned you down. She did. Said she'd rather have nothing than half a life. He looked at June then, his dark eyes serious. Is that what you think this is, half a life? June considered the question. These past weeks had been fuller than any she'd known at her uncle's house. The work, the companionship, the sense of building something together. It might not be the stuff of romantic novels, but it was real and solid. No, she said finally. I think it's a different kind of life. Maybe not what girls dream about, but dreams have a way of turning to nightmares. What we have is steady. Steady, Cole repeated with a slight smile. Not very romantic. Romance is overrated, June said firmly. Give me steady any day. But that night, as they sat by the fire in their established routine, June found herself thinking about Sarah's words. Was Cole's heart truly locked away? And if so, did it matter? They had a good partnership, mutual respect, a growing friendship. Wasn't that enough? She looked across at him, noting the way the firelight played across his features, the careful way he was mending a bridle. His hands were gentle despite their strength, patient with the leather and buckles. Those same hands had pulled her from the storm, had offered her shelter and safety without asking anything in return. Cole, she said softly. He looked up, questioning. What Sarah said. It doesn't matter to me. What we have. What we're building. It's good. It's more than I hoped for when I ran that night. Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes. You're a remarkable woman, June Travern. The use of her married name sent an unexpected warmth through her. Just practical, she said, echoing his usual phrase. No, he said quietly. Not just practical. Kind, strong, brave. Any man would be lucky to have you as a partner. It was probably the longest speech about feelings she'd heard from him. June felt her cheeks warm and looked back at her mending to hide her reaction. They sat in companionable silence until the fire burned low. When June rose to retire, Cole stood as well. June, what you said about needing to be more convincing as a married couple, you're right. Tomorrow, when we go to town for supplies, we should. That is, we should act more like two people who chose each other, June suggested gently. Yes, that. June surprised herself by stepping closer to him. Then we should probably practice, so it seems natural. Cole went very still. Practice. Heart hammering. June reached up and placed her hand against his cheek. He was warm, his skin rough with evening stubble. Is this all right? Yes. His voice was barely a whisper. They stood like that for a moment, June's hand on his face. Cole looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read, then, moving slowly, as if afraid to spook her, he covered her hand with his own. This is convincing, he asked, and she could hear a smile in his voice. It's a start, June managed, her voice not quite steady. They stood there another heartbeat before stepping apart by mutual, unspoken agreement. June fled to her room, her hand still tingling from the contact. Lying in bed, she thought about locked doors and locked hearts. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe Cole wasn't capable of the kind of love poets wrote about. But standing there with him tonight, his hand gentle over hers, June had felt something that transcended poetry. Connection, trust, the first stirrings of something that might, given time and patience, grow into its own kind of love. Not the wild passion that had driven her to kiss him in the storm, but something steadier, something that could weather whatever storms Hutchinson or anyone else might bring. And that, June thought as sleep claimed her, was worth more than all the romance in the world. The trip to town the next morning started with careful awkwardness. Cole helped June onto the wagon seat, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary at her waist. She placed her hand on his arm as they rode, the way she'd seen other married couples do. Each touch felt deliberate, practiced, yet not entirely unwelcome. They were just entering the main street when June spotted them, her uncle and Hutchinson, standing outside the land office with a man in a city suit she didn't recognize. Her hand tightened involuntarily on Cole's arm. "I see them," Cole said quietly. "Keep your head up. We've done nothing wrong." As they passed, Hutchinson tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. The stranger watched them with sharp, calculating eyes that made June's skin crawl. She forced herself to smile, to play the part of a content wife on a routine shopping trip. At the general store, Mrs. Henderson greeted them with barely concealed curiosity. "Mr. and Mrs. Travern, how nice to see you in town together." "We needed supplies," Cole said simply, but he kept his hand at the small of June's back, a protective gesture that felt increasingly natural. As June selected fabric and thread, she overheard whispers from two women near the canned goods. "Married so quick, there must have been a reason." "And I heard she threw herself at him." "That Hutchinson says she's touched in the head." June's cheeks burned, but she kept her attention on the fabric, running her fingers over a soft blue cotton that would make a nice shirt for Cole. When he joined her, she showed it to him with a smile that only trembled slightly. "This would suit you," she said, loud enough to be overheard. "For church on Sundays." Cole caught on immediately. "If you think so, you know best about such things." It was such a normal, married conversation that the whispers stopped. June felt a small surge of victory. They were loading their purchases when the stranger from the land office approached. Up close, June could see he had the soft look of a man who worked with papers, not land. "Mr. Travern, Mrs. Travern. My name is Clarence Booth. I'm a lawyer from Cheyenne, here on behalf of Mr. Hutchinson." Cole's expression didn't change, but June felt him tense. "State your business, Mr. Booth." "I've been retained to look into certain irregularities regarding Mrs. Travern's inheritance. There are questions about the validity of her father's claim to the land, and whether she has the mental capacity to manage such property." "My wife's mental capacity is not in question," Cole said evenly. "Perhaps not by you, sir, but her guardian has sworn statements about her unstable behavior, running away in a dangerous storm, forming an improper attachment to the first man who showed her kindness." Booth's smile was oily. "A judge might find such behavior concerning." June found her voice. "My uncle is no longer my guardian. I'm a married woman." "Ah, but if the marriage was entered into while you were in a state of mental distress, it could be invalidated." Booth pulled out a document. "Mr. Whitaker is prepared to testify that you've shown signs of instability since your parents' death, talking to yourself, making up stories, unable to distinguish reality from fantasy." "That's a lie," June said hotly. "Is it? Then why did you run into a life-threatening storm rather than discuss your concerns rationally? Why marry a virtual stranger within days of meeting him?" Booth's eyes glittered with false sympathy. "These are not the actions of a sound mind, Mrs. Travern." Cole stepped forward, placing himself partially between June and the lawyer. "You've said your piece. Now move along." "Of course, but Mr. Hutchinson wanted me to make one thing clear. He's a reasonable man. If Mrs. Travern were to annul this hasty marriage and accept Mr. Hutchinson's protection instead, all questions about her mental state would disappear. The land would be properly managed, and she would want for nothing." "Except freedom," June said quietly. "Except dignity. Except the right to make my own choices." Booth shrugged. "Choices are a luxury for those of sound mind. My dear, I'll be in town for the week. Should you reconsider?" After he left, June realized she was shaking. Cole's arm came around her shoulders, steady and warm. "Don't let him rattle you," he said quietly. "It's all bluster." But June could see the concern in his eyes. They rode home in thoughtful silence, the pretense of affection forgotten in the weight of this new threat. That evening, Cole was restless. He paced the main room like a caged wolf while June tried to focus on mending. "Maybe you should go," he said suddenly. "My sister in Cheyenne would take you in. You could disappear, start fresh somewhere Hutchinson can't find you." June set down her sewing. "Is that what you want for me to run?" "I want you safe." Cole stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair. "This is escalating beyond what I expected. If they paint you as mentally incompetent, you could lose everything, your land, your freedom. They could even commit you to an asylum." The words sent ice through June's veins. She'd heard stories of women locked away for being difficult or hysterical. "All the more reason not to run," she said, surprising herself with her calm. Running would only prove their point. A stable, rational woman doesn't flee her home and husband. "June." "No, Cole, I'm through running." She stood, facing him across the room. "You asked me once if I thought this was half a life. It's not. It's my life, our life, and I won't let them take it." Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." June squeezed his hands, drawing strength from their solid warmth. "But we need to be smarter. If they're questioning my sanity, we need to prove otherwise. That means being visible in town, attending church, acting like any other married couple." "Sarah's still in town," Cole said slowly. "Her testimony about Tom's suspicions regarding Hutchinson might help. And there are others who've had dealings with him, others who might speak up if asked." "Then we ask." June felt a fierce determination rising in her. "We gather our own statements, our own proof, and we show the world that I'm exactly what I am, a woman who chose her own path." Cole smiled then, that rare, transformative expression. "You've got steel in you, June Travern." "I had a good teacher," she said, meaning it. These weeks with Cole had shown her strength she didn't know she possessed. They spent the next days implementing their plan. June made a point of visiting neighboring ranches, offering help with canning and mending, showing herself to be competent and stable. Cole spoke quietly with men who'd lost land to Hutchinson through suspicious circumstances. It was on one of these visits that June learned something unexpected. She was helping Mary Morrison with laundry when the older woman said, "You know, dear, I think you've been good for Cole." "Oh," June kept her voice casual, though her heart jumped. "He smiles more, talks more, too. Used to be pulling words from him was like pulling teeth." Mary gave her a knowing look. A good woman can unlock a man's heart without even trying. June thought of Sarah's words about Cole's locked heart. "I don't know about that. We're just comfortable together." "Comfortable?" Mary laughed. "Child, I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks nobody's watching. That's not comfort. That's a man falling without even knowing he's fallen." June felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You're imagining things." "Am I?" "When Frank came home from town yesterday, he said Cole nearly took Ezra Hutchinson's head off for making a crude remark about you. That's not the action of a man in a business arrangement." June's hand stilled on the washing. "What kind of remark?" Mary's expression darkened. "Nothing worth repeating, but Cole made it clear that anyone who disrespected his wife would answer to him. Frank said he's never seen Cole that angry." That evening, June watched Cole more carefully. Was Mary right? She thought of all the small moments. His hand at her back in town, the way he'd said her name with such fierce pride. The careful distance he maintained that seemed more about honor than lack of feeling. "You're staring," Cole said without looking up from the harness he was mending. "Mary Morrison says you defended my honor in town yesterday." His hands paused. Hutchinson needed reminding of his manners. "What did he say?" "Nothing worth repeating." The echo of Mary's words made June smile. "Cole." She waited until he looked up. "Thank you for defending me. For all of it." He held her gaze, and something passed between them, warm and unspoken. Then he cleared his throat and returned to his work. But June noticed his ears were red, and she hid her own smile. The next morning brought an unexpected ally. Judge William Crawford from the circuit court arrived at their ranch, a stern-faced man with honest eyes. "I'm not from around these parts," he said, accepting coffee from June. "Which is why I think you sought me out, Mr. Travern, no local entanglements." "We need an impartial ear," Cole agreed. "Hutchinson's trying to paint my wife as mentally incompetent to steal her inheritance." "So I've heard." Crawford studied June shrewdly. "Tell me your story, Mrs. Travern, all of it." So June did, speaking calmly and clearly about her parents' death, her years with her uncle, the attempted forced marriage to Hutchinson. She showed him her father's papers, explained about the railroad coming through. "I see." Crawford leaned back. "And your marriage to Mr. Travern?" June felt Cole tense beside her, but she met the judge's eyes steadily. "Was my choice, freely made. Cole offered me protection and partnership. I accepted because I saw in him an honest man who would respect my autonomy. In the weeks since, I've found that assessment to be correct. Some would say marrying a stranger so quickly shows poor judgment. Some would say forcing a woman into marriage with a man she fears shows worse judgment." June countered. "I chose the better of my options. Judge Crawford, that seems entirely rational to me." The judge's stern expression cracked into something like a smile. "Well argued, Mrs. Travern." He turned to Cole. "I'll be staying in town for the circuit court session next week. If Hutchinson wants to challenge this marriage or Mrs. Travern's competency, he'll have to do it in my court, not Harlan's. I trust that changes the game somewhat." After Crawford left, June felt the first real hope since Booth's threats. "He believed us." "He believed you," Cole corrected. "You spoke like the intelligent, capable woman you are. No one listening could doubt your sanity." The praise warmed her more than it should have. "We make a good team." "We do." Cole hesitated, then added, "June, about what you told Crawford. Did you mean it about finding your assessment of me correct?" June turned to face him fully. "Every word. You're the most honest man I've known. Cole, these weeks have shown me that." Something flickered in his dark eyes. "I'm trying to be for you." The admission hung between them, fragile and significant. June wanted to say more, to explore this new territory opening between them, but the moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses. Sarah Baxter arrived with Frank Morrison and the two other ranchers June recognized. Her elegant appearance was marred by dust and determination. "We need to talk," Sarah announced. "All of us who've suffered from Hutchinson's schemes. It's time to take a stand." As the group gathered in the main room, June noticed Sarah watching her and Cole, noting the casual way Cole's hand rested on June's shoulder as they stood together. "You were right, Cole," Sarah said quietly while the others talked. "She is remarkable." Cole's hand tightened slightly on June's shoulder. "Yes, she is." Sarah's smile was sad but genuine. "I'm glad. Truly, you deserve happiness, even if you don't believe in it." She turned to June. "I owe you an apology. What I said before, about Cole being incapable of love, I was wrong. I can see that now." "What changed your mind?" June asked. "The way he looks at you, the way he stands with you, it's different from what he offered me. You've unlocked something in him I couldn't reach." Before June could respond, Frank Morrison called the meeting to order. They spent the next hour sharing stories of Hutchinson's dealings, building a case that painted him as a predator who used any means to acquire land. "With Judge Crawford presiding, we might actually get justice," one rancher said hopefully. "Only if we stand together," Cole warned. "Hutchinson won't go down easily. He'll threaten, bribe, do whatever it takes to silence us." "Then we protect each other," June said firmly. "The way neighbors should." As the group dispersed, Sarah lingered. I'll testify about Tom's suspicions, she told them. It's time the truth came out. After she left, Cole and June stood on the porch watching the sun set. The evening was peaceful, but June could feel the tension in Cole, the worry he tried to hide. It's going to get worse before it gets better, he said quietly. I know. June slipped her hand into his, no longer pretending. But we'll face it together, partners. Remember. Cole looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. June, I need to tell you something. These weeks with you, they've changed things for me. Changed me. I don't know if I can offer what you deserve, but... Cole! June squeezed his hand. You've already given me more than I dared hope for. Whatever grows between us, let it grow naturally. We have time. Do we? His voice was rough with emotion. With Hutchinson threatening everything. He's threatening our peace, our security. But this, she gestured between them. This is ours. He can't touch what we're building together, not the heart of it. Cole pulled her closer, and June went willingly into his arms. It wasn't like that desperate kiss in the storm. This was quiet, certain, a promise more than passion. Whatever happens at the trial, Cole murmured against her hair. I want you to know, asking you to marry me wasn't just about protection or partnership anymore. Hasn't been for a while now. June's heart soared even as she kept her voice steady. I know, for me either. They stood there as darkness fell, holding each other with a tenderness that spoke of growing trust and deepening feeling. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Hutchinson's threats, the trial, the fight for June's inheritance. But tonight, they had the quiet certainty of two hearts learning to beat as one. When they finally went inside, June didn't retreat to her room. Instead, she sat beside Cole on the small settee, her head on his shoulder as they watched the fire burn low. It was intimate without being improper, comfortable in a way that spoke of a future being built one careful day at a time. No more locked doors between us, Cole asked softly. No more locked doors, June agreed. Just the one we locked together against the world. And in that simple exchange, they both understood that something fundamental had shifted. They were no longer two people bound by convenience and necessity. They were becoming something more, a true partnership of hearts as well as hands. The battle for June's freedom and inheritance was far from over. But win or lose, she'd already gained something precious, a love built on respect, trust, and the slow, steady revelation of two guarded hearts learning to open to each other. That was worth fighting for, worth any risk. And as June drifted off to sleep in Cole's arms, she knew with bone-deep certainty that together they could weather whatever storm Hutchinson tried to bring. The day of reckoning came with a bright autumn sun that seemed to mock the tension in the air. June dressed carefully in her best dress, a deep blue that Mary Morrison had helped her finish just days before. As she pinned up her hair, her hands trembled slightly. You look beautiful, Cole said from the doorway. He was wearing his Sunday suit, looking uncomfortable but determined in the formal clothes. I look respectable, June corrected, though his words warmed her. That's what matters today. Cole crossed to her, taking her hands. Whatever happens in that courtroom, remember you're my wife, legally and truly. Nothing Hutchinson says can change that. June squeezed his hands, drawing strength from his steady presence. Over the past days, their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected but both treasured. The pretense of affection had given way to genuine feeling, expressed in small touches and shared glances that needed no audience. The town was bustling when they arrived. News of the hearing had spread, and it seemed everyone in the county had come to watch. June kept her head high as they made their way through the crowd, aware of the whispers following in their wake. In the courthouse, Hutchinson sat with his lawyer Booth, looking confident and cold. June's uncle was beside them, avoiding her gaze, on their side. Sarah Baxter sat with the Morrisons and other ranchers who'd agreed to testify. Judge Crawford called the proceedings to order with a stern rap of his gavel. We're here to address the petition brought by Mr. Ezra Hutchinson regarding the mental competency of Mrs. June Travern, formerly Whitaker, and the validity of her marriage to Mr. Cole Travern. Mr. Booth, you may present your case. Booth stood, his oily smile in place. Your Honor, we intend to show that Miss Whitaker, I cannot in good conscience call her Mrs. Travern, was in a state of mental distress when she entered into this hasty marriage. Her uncle, who raised her from the age of 14, will testify to her unstable behavior. Silas Whitaker took the stand, his face flushed with drink despite the early hour. Under Booth's questioning, he painted a picture of June as unstable, given to flights of fancy, unable to manage simple household tasks without supervision. She'd talk to herself for hours, Silas said, not meeting June's eyes. Making up stories, living in a dream world. When I tried to arrange a suitable marriage for her own good, she flew into hysterics and ran off into a dangerous storm. That's not the action of a sound mind. June felt Cole's hand find hers under the table, a silent reminder that he was there, that she wasn't facing this alone. When it came time for cross-examination, the lawyer they'd hired, Mr. Peterson from Cheyenne, stood slowly. Mr. Whitaker, these conversations you claim your niece had with herself, did anyone else witness them? Well, no, but... And these household tasks she couldn't manage. Yet she kept your house for 8 years without a servant. She was adequate when supervised. I see. Tell me, Mr. Whitaker, how much did Mr. Hutchinson offer you for your niece's hand in marriage? Silas's face went red. That's not relevant. On the contrary, it's quite relevant. Did money change hands? A man's got a right to be compensated for raising an orphan. Silas blustered. So you sold your niece? Peterson's voice was flat. Like livestock. I was arranging her future. By forcing her to marry a man with 2 dead wives. Peterson let that hang in the air before continuing. No further questions. Next, Booth called several townspeople who testified to seeing June in town looking distracted or troubled in the weeks before her marriage. But under cross-examination, each admitted they'd never actually spoken to her, basing their opinions on glimpse and gossip. Then it was the defense's turn. Sarah Baxter took the stand first, explaining her late husband's suspicions about Hutchinson's land-grabbing schemes. Tom was gathering evidence when he died, she said clearly. He believed Mr. Hutchinson was behind the mysterious troubles that forced several ranchers to sell. After Tom's death, Mr. Hutchinson immediately approached me about buying our land. And did you feel pressured? Peterson asked. I felt terrified, Sarah admitted. That's why I sold and left town. I wasn't as brave as Mrs. Travern. Frank Morrison and the other ranchers testified next, each telling stories of Hutchinson's predatory practices. A pattern emerged of a man who used any means necessary to acquire what he wanted. Finally, June herself was called to testify. She stood, smoothing her skirt, and walked to the stand with steady steps. Mrs. Travern, Peterson began gently. Tell us about the night you left your uncle's home. June spoke clearly and calmly about the attempted forced marriage, her uncle's treatment of her, her decision to flee. She didn't embellish or dramatize, letting the facts speak for themselves. And your marriage to Mr. Travern was my choice, freely made. June looked at Cole as she spoke. He offered me protection and respect. In the weeks since, he's proven himself to be exactly the honorable man I believed him to be. Booth rose for cross-examination, his smile sharp. Mrs. Travern, you claim to be of sound mind, yet you married a virtual stranger within days of meeting him. How is that rational? More rational than marrying a man I knew to be cruel. June replied evenly. I had limited options, Mr. Booth. I chose the one that offered me dignity and autonomy. You kissed Mr. Travern the night you met, Booth said, causing a stir in the courtroom. In the middle of a storm, you threw yourself at him. Does that sound like rational behavior? June felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. I was frightened and acted impulsively. Mr. Travern behaved with complete propriety, offering me nothing but shelter and safety. One moment of fear-driven impropriety doesn't negate a lifetime of rational decisions. Yet you claim to love him now. How convenient. I fail to see how loving my husband indicates mental instability, June said. If anything, it shows good judgment. Cole Travern is a man worthy of respect and affection. So you admit this marriage is based on emotion rather than reason. June lifted her chin. I admit it's based on both. I made a practical decision that has grown into genuine affection. Isn't that how the best marriages work? When June returned to her seat, Cole took her hand openly, proudly, around them. She could hear murmurs of approval from many in the crowd. Judge Crawford called a brief recess. During the break, Hutchinson approached them, his cold eyes furious. You think you've won something here? He said quietly. Even if the judge rules in your favor, I'll make your lives miserable. That land will be mine, one way or another. Is that a threat? Hutchinson? Cole's voice was dangerously calm. It's a promise. Hutchinson's smile was ugly. Accidents happen on ranches all the time. Cattle disappear, barns burn, wells go dry. How long before your little wife here decides she's had enough and sells? As long as it takes, June said, surprising them both with her firmness. I'm not Sarah Baxter, Mr. Hutchinson. I won't run, and I'm not alone. She gestured to the packed courtroom, the neighbors and friends who'd come to support them. You've terrorized this county for years, but we're done being afraid. Whatever you try, we'll face it together. Hutchinson's face darkened, but before he could respond, Judge Crawford returned. The ruling was swift and decisive. After hearing all testimony, I find no evidence of mental incompetence on the part of Mrs. June Travern. She appears to be an intelligent, rational young woman who made difficult choices under trying circumstances. The marriage to Mr. Cole Travern is valid and will stand. Furthermore, any attempts to harass or intimidate the Traverns will be met with the full force of the law. The courtroom erupted in mixed reactions, cheers from their supporters, angry mutters from Hutchinson's faction. June felt relief wash over her so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. Cole's arm came around her waist, steady and sure. It's over, he murmured in her ear. But as they made their way out of the courthouse, June saw Hutchinson's face and knew Cole was wrong. This battle was won, but the war was far from over. That evening, their ranch was full of neighbors celebrating the victory. Mary Morrison had brought food. Frank had brought whiskey. And even Sarah Baxter had come to offer her congratulations before taking the stage back to Denver. Be happy, Sarah told June quietly as she prepared to leave. You've earned it. And June, take care of him. He's a better man than he knows. As the party wound down and the last neighbors departed, June and Cole found themselves alone on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. Hutchinson won't give up, Cole said quietly. I know. June leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her. But I meant what I said. I won't run. This is our home. Our home. Cole repeated the words like a prayer. June, I need to say something. In the courtroom, when you talked about loving me. June turned in his arms to face him. I meant it. Every word. I'm not good with words, Cole said, his hands framing her face. Never have been, but these past weeks with you, June, you've brought light into places I thought would stay dark forever. I don't know if what I feel is what poets call love, but I know I'd face Hutchinson and a dozen like him to keep you safe. I know the thought of you leaving takes the breath from my lungs. I know you've made this ranch a home in a way it never was before. Cole, June whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I know I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life," he continued. "Not as a business partner or a convenient arrangement, but as my wife in every way, if you'll have me." Instead of answering with words, June kissed him, not with the desperate fear of that first night, but with all the tenderness and certainty that had grown between them. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Is that a yes?" Cole asked, a rare smile playing at his lips. "That's a yes to everything," June confirmed. "To facing whatever comes together, to building a life and a family here, to loving each other through whatever storms may come." Cole's answer was to sweep her up in his arms, carrying her toward the house. "No more separate rooms?" he asked. "No more separate rooms," June agreed, her heart full to bursting. "No more walls between us at all." As Cole carried her over the threshold of their home, truly their home now, June thought about doors and locks and the strange paths that led to love. She'd fled her uncle's house in terror, stolen a desperate kiss in a storm, and found herself locked in by a man who meant only to protect her. Now, as night fell over their ranch and their neighbors returned to spread the word of their victory, June knew that some doors were meant to close. The door to her past, to a life of fear and servitude, was firmly shut. But the door to her future, a future with Cole, facing whatever challenges came with courage and love, that door was wide open. Hutchinson would come for them. She had no doubt of that. But he would find them ready, united, and unafraid. Because June had learned something in these weeks with Cole, the strongest locks weren't made of iron or wood. They were forged from trust, respect, and love. And those were locks that no enemy could break. As Cole set her down inside their home, June pulled him close for another kiss. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they would celebrate not just their legal victory, but the deeper triumph of two guarded hearts learning to trust, to open, to love. The girl who'd stolen one kiss in the storm had become a woman who'd stolen a good man's heart, and in return, he'd given her everything: safety, partnership, and a love as steady and enduring as the land itself. It was more than enough. It was everything. The user wants me to write Part 8 of the story according to the outline. Looking at the outline for Part 8. **8. Kaijia kua subao vei vaingai sao. Nongtai songtro lai vao bandem. Mot kuok dao songnora gua koleva nunkela mat. Kola bithuong ovai. Nunca nombide lui. June. Tai run rei nung van ko cham sok vet thuong chuan. Landau thuanan. Kong biet min ko gidedang hien. Ngoai trai tim min. So this part should take place a few days after the trial. Show gunmen returning at night. Have a gunfight where Cole is wounded in the shoulder. Show the attackers being driven off. Feature June caring for Cole's wound with shaking hands. Include June's confession about having nothing to offer but her heart. Be 1,500 to 1,800 words. Maintain period-appropriate language and setting. Keep content YouTube-friendly. 3 days after the trial, a false peace settled over the ranch. June threw herself into the autumn work, preserving vegetables, mending winter clothes, preparing for the cold months ahead. Cole worked from dawn to dusk, checking fence lines and moving cattle to winter pastures. They both knew Hutchinson wouldn't accept defeat quietly, but the waiting wore on the nerves worse than any direct confrontation. It was near midnight when the dogs started barking. June woke instantly, her hand reaching for Cole beside her. He was already sitting up, listening with the intense stillness of a man who'd learned to read danger in the night sounds. "Stay here," he whispered, reaching for his rifle. "Cole, I mean it. June, bar the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me." He slipped out before she could protest. June rose quickly, pulling on her wrapper and grabbing the shotgun from its place by the door. Cole might want her to hide, but she'd learned these past weeks that partnership meant standing together, especially in the face of danger. Through the window, she could see shadows moving near the barn. 3, maybe 4 men, trying to use the moonless night as cover. Her heart hammered as she watched Cole move silently along the porch, using the shadows to his advantage. Then everything erupted at once. A shout, the crack of gunfire, the whinnying of frightened horses. June saw Cole dive behind the water trough as bullets splintered the wood where he'd been standing. "Travern," a rough voice called out. "No need for anyone to get hurt. Just send out your woman and we'll be on our way." "Go to hell," Cole called back, punctuating his words with a shot that sent one shadow scrambling for cover. June's hands were steady as she eased open a window just wide enough for the shotgun barrel. She'd learned to shoot years ago, one of the few useful things her uncle had taught her, though he'd never intended for her to use the skill against men he'd sent. More gunfire erupted. June could see Cole pinned down behind the trough, 3 men advancing on his position. Without thinking, she fired, the shotgun's roar deafening in the night. Her shot went wide, but it scattered the attackers, giving Cole time to move to better cover behind the corn crib. "Damn it, June!" she heard him yell. "Get back!" But June was already reloading. One of the attackers had noticed her window and was moving toward the house. She fired again, this time hitting close enough to send him diving behind the chicken coop. The battle seemed to last forever, though it was probably only minutes. Cole had the better position now, picking off shots that kept the attackers from advancing. June continued to fire from the window, not trying to hit anyone but keeping them from flanking Cole's position. Then she saw it, a 4th man, one she hadn't spotted before, creeping along the far side of the barn. He had a clear angle on Cole, who was focused on the 3 men in front of him. "Cole behind you." Her warning came just in time. Cole spun, firing as he moved, but not quite fast enough. June saw him jerk as a bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard behind a pile of feed sacks. "No!" The word tore from June's throat. Without thinking, she threw open the door and ran onto the porch, firing the shotgun wildly at the 4th attacker. "Get away from him!" Her reckless charge must have surprised them. The attackers hesitated, perhaps not expecting a woman in her night clothes to come out shooting. In that moment of confusion, Cole struggled back to his feet, his left arm hanging useless but his right still steady on his pistol. "That's enough," a new voice cut through the night. Frank Morrison and several other neighbors came riding hard into the yard, rifles at the ready. "Drop your weapons, all of you." The attackers, outnumbered now and with one wounded from Cole's shots, didn't need to be told twice. They threw down their guns, hands raised in surrender. June didn't care about any of that. She ran to Cole, catching him as he swayed on his feet. Blood soaked his shirt, dark and spreading. "Foolish woman," he muttered, though his good arm came around her. "Told you to stay inside." "Foolish man," June countered, tears streaming down her face. "Thinking I'd hide while you fought alone?" Frank and the others secured the attackers while Mary Morrison helped June get Cole inside. He was pale but conscious, gritting his teeth as they eased him into a chair by the fire. "Bullet's still in there," Mary said after examining the wound. "We'll need Doc Stevens." "Already sent Tommy for him," Frank said from the doorway. "These men aren't talking, but I'd bet my ranch Hutchinson sent them." "Can't prove it, though," Cole said through gritted teeth. "They'll claim they were just drifters looking to rob the place." June barely heard them. Her hands shook as she pressed clean cloth against Cole's wound, trying to stem the bleeding. The sight of his blood, the knowledge of how close that bullet had come to taking him from her, made her stomach clench with fear. "June!" Cole's voice was gentle despite his pain. "I'm all right. Look at me. I'm all right." She met his eyes, seeing the reassurance there along with something else, pride, perhaps, or admiration. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That 4th man would have had me if you hadn't warned me." "You wouldn't have been in danger if not for me," June said, her voice thick with tears. "This is my fault. Hutchinson wants me, wants my land." You're just in his way. Hey, Cole caught her hand with his good one. None of that. We're partners. Remember, your fights are my fights. Doc Stevens arrived within the hour, his black bag and gruff manner bringing some semblance of order to the chaos. He sent everyone out except June, who refused to leave. Need someone to help anyway, the doctor said. You got a steady hand, Mrs. Travern. June's hands had stopped shaking the moment the doctor needed her. She helped hold Cole still as Doc Stevens probed for the bullet, her heart breaking at Cole's muffled groans despite the whiskey they'd given him for the pain. Got it, the doctor finally announced, dropping the bloody bullet into a basin. You're lucky. Travern, inch to the left and it would have shattered the bone. As it is, you'll heal clean if you don't do anything stupid. Define stupid, Cole said weakly. Working, riding, fighting off hired guns. Doc Stevens said dryly, basically everything you normally do. You need rest, and I mean it. Let your wife run things for a few weeks. After the doctor left and the neighbors dispersed, taking the captured gunman to town for the sheriff, June and Cole were alone. She helped him to their bed, fussing with pillows and blankets until he caught her hand. June, stop, I'm fine. You're not fine. The tears she'd held back during the crisis finally spilled over. You were shot. You could have been killed. Because of me. Because of Hutchinson, Cole corrected firmly. And I'd take a dozen bullets before I'd let him have you. June sank onto the bed beside him, careful of his bandaged shoulder. I was so frightened. When I saw you fall. She couldn't finish. But you didn't let fear stop you. You came out shooting like an avenging angel. A weak smile crossed Cole's face. Remind me never to make you angry. This isn't funny. June wiped at her tears. I could have lost you tonight. And for what? Some land it's not worth your life. Cole, nothing is. You are. The simple words stopped her cold. June, that land is your inheritance, your future. But more than that, it's about right and wrong, about standing up to men like Hutchinson who think they can take whatever they want. We can't let him win. June was quiet for a long moment, studying her husband's face in the lamplight, even pale with pain. He was the strongest man she knew, not just physically, but in his convictions, his quiet determination to do what was right. I have nothing to give you, she whispered. No dowry, no connections, no skills beyond basic ranch work. All I have is my heart, and I don't know if that's enough to balance against the danger I've brought to your door. Cole's good hand came up to cup her cheek. Your heart is worth more than all the gold in California. Don't you know that by now? Cole, listen to me. His thumb brushed away a tear. Before you came, I was existing. Working sunrise to sunset, building a ranch with no real purpose beyond survival. You've given me something to fight for, June, something to build toward, a future that means something. But the cost is mine to pay, gladly. He pulled her down gently until her forehead rested against his. I love you, June Travern, not for your land or what you might bring to the ranch. I love your courage, your kindness, the way you hum when you're happy and bite your lip when you're thinking. I love how you've made this house a home and given my life meaning I never thought to find. June's tears flowed freely now, but they were different tears. I love you too, so much it terrifies me. When I saw that man aiming at you, all I could think was that I'd rather die than live without you. No dying, Cole said firmly. Neither of us. We're going to live a long, full life together. Raise children who'll inherit both our stubbornness. Build this ranch into something special. And Hutchinson be damned if he thinks he can stop us. June kissed him then, gentle and sweet, mindful of his injury. When she pulled back, she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. Sleep now, she said. I'll keep watch. June, no arguments. Partners share the load. Remember, you've been standing guard over me since that first night. Now it's my turn. Cole squeezed her hand, his eyes already drooping. "Don't suppose I could talk you out of sitting up with that shotgun?" "Not a chance," June said with a watery smile. "Though I might clean it first. I seem to have fired it rather enthusiastically." "That's my girl," Cole murmured, already half asleep. "My brave, beautiful, stubborn girl." June sat beside him as he slept, one hand on his chest to feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The shotgun leaned against the nightstand, cleaned and loaded. She'd learned many things since that night she'd fled into the storm, but perhaps the most important was this love wasn't just about passion or poetry. It was about standing guard through the long nights, facing danger together, and choosing each other again and again despite the cost. Outside, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. The attack had failed, and word would spread that the Traverns wouldn't be intimidated. Hutchinson would think twice before sending men again, especially with the neighbors alerted and ready to ride to their aid. But even if he did, June would be ready. She'd found something worth fighting for, not just the land or her freedom, but the man sleeping beside her and the life they were building together. Her heart might be all she had to offer, but looking at Cole's peaceful face, she knew it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The weeks following the attack passed in a blur of healing and hard work. Cole chafed at his enforced rest, but June proved as stubborn about his recovery as she'd been about everything else. She managed the ranch with surprising efficiency, learning from the hands Cole had hired and earning their respect through sheer determination. It was a crisp November morning when the letter arrived that would change everything. June was mending harnesses on the porch, enjoying the weak sunshine. When she saw the rider approaching, her hand went automatically to the rifle beside her, a habit now since the attack, but she recognized him as young Timothy Sawyer from town. "Letter for you, Mrs. Travern," he said, tipping his hat. "From Cheyenne." The lawyer said it was urgent. June's hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. The return address was from Morrison and Associates, the law firm that had helped with the trial. She waited until Timothy had ridden away before opening it, her heart racing. Inside was a letter from her mother's cousin in Boston, a woman June had never met but who had apparently been following the news of the trial. The cousin, Margaret Whitman, was offering June a substantial sum for her land, enough to set her and Cole up comfortably anywhere they chose to go. "It would remove you from danger," the letter read, "and allow you to start fresh somewhere, mister. Hutchinson cannot reach you." June was still staring at the letter when Cole emerged from the house, his arm in a sling but his color much improved. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, reading her expression, wordlessly. June handed him the letter. She watched his face as he read, saw the moment he understood what was being offered. "It's a good offer," he said quietly. "More than fair. We could buy a bigger ranch somewhere else, start over without looking over our shoulders." "Is that what you want?" June asked, her voice carefully neutral. Cole set the letter aside and sat beside her on the porch steps. "What I want is you safe. If selling means Hutchinson leaves us alone." "He won't," June interrupted. "You know he won't. It's not about the land anymore. If it ever was, it's about winning, about not being defied. If we run now, he'll just follow us somewhere else." "Then what do you want to do?" June looked out over their ranch, the fields Cole had worked so hard to clear, the cattle grazing peacefully, the mountains rising in the distance. This place had become home in a way her uncle's house never was. "I want to fight," she said firmly. "Not just for the land, but for the right to live where and how we choose. My parents died trying to build something here. You've spent years making this ranch what it is. I won't let Hutchinson drive us away." Cole's good arm came around her shoulders. "That's my brave girl. But June, it could get worse before it gets better. The men who attacked us haven't implicated Hutchinson, but he's not going to stop. Then we need to be smarter." June leaned into his warmth. "The lawyer in Cheyenne, He seemed to think there might be federal interest in the railroad land deals. If we could prove Hutchinson's been using illegal means to acquire property, it's worth looking into. Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. We'll write back. Decline the offer, but ask about federal investigators. And June, thank you. For what? For being willing to stay and fight. This ranch. It's never felt like home until you came. I don't want to lose that either. They spent the afternoon composing their response. Heads bent together over the kitchen table. It was domestic and peaceful. A moment of quiet partnership that June treasured, but she should have known it wouldn't last. The next day brought an unexpected visitor. June was feeding the chickens when she heard a buggy approaching. Her heart sank when she recognized the passenger, Clarence Booth, Hutchinson's oily lawyer. Mrs. Travern, he called out cheerfully, as if they were old friends. Lovely morning, isn't it? State your business, Mr. Booth, June said coldly, noting with relief that Cole was already coming from the barn, several ranch hands with him. Ah, the protective husband. Booth's smile never wavered. No need for alarm. I come with a message of reconciliation, Mr. Hutchinson realizes things have gotten out of hand. He wants to make peace. By sending gunmen to our home. Cole's voice was dangerous. An unfortunate misunderstanding. Some drifters, Mr. Hutchinson had previously turned away from employment. He was horrified to learn they'd attacked you. Booth's lie was smooth as silk. To make amends, he's prepared to make you a very generous offer for Mrs. Travern's land. Much more than it's worth. Really. It's not for sale, June said flatly. Everything has a price. My dear Mr. Hutchinson is prepared to offer. Did you not hear my wife? Cole stepped forward. The land is not for sale. Not to Hutchinson, not to anyone. Booth's friendly mask slipped a bit. You're being foolish. This offer won't stand forever. And accidents do happen on ranches, especially to men who can't work properly due to injuries. The threat hung in the air like smoke. June felt rage rise in her throat. But before she could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. Mr. Booth, I believe you're on private property without invitation. Everyone turned to see a stranger dismounting from a dust-covered horse. He was young, maybe 30, with the kind of clean-cut look that spoke of cities and education. And you are, Booth demanded. James Harper, federal marshal. The man produced a badge. I'm investigating certain irregularities in land acquisitions along the proposed railroad route. Your name has come up several times. Mr. Booth, as has your employer's. Booth's face went pale. I don't know what you mean. All Mr. Hutchinson's dealings have been completely legal. Then you won't mind answering some questions. In fact, I insist on it. Harper's smile was pleasant, but his eyes were steel. You can come voluntarily, or I can arrest you for witness intimidation. Your choice. Booth sputtered, but he had no real choice. As Harper led him away, the marshal turned back to June and Cole. Mr. and Mrs. Travern, I'll need to speak with you as well, but not today. Today, I think you've earned some peace. He tipped his hat. I'll be in touch soon. And don't worry, Mr. Hutchinson is about to find himself too busy to cause you any more trouble. After they left, June and Cole stood in stunned silence for a moment. Then June let out a laugh that was half relief, half disbelief. Did that really just happen? I think it did. Cole pulled her close with his good arm. Looks like your letter to Cheyenne worked faster than we expected. But even as they celebrated this unexpected turn, June couldn't shake a sense of unease. Hutchinson wouldn't go down without a fight, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. Her fears proved justified 3 nights later. June woke to the smell of smoke and the orange glow of fire through their bedroom window. Cole, she shook him awake. Fire, the barn's on fire! They raced outside to find the barn fully engulfed. flames leaping toward the star-filled sky. The horses were screaming in terror, trapped inside. "Get water from the well," Cole shouted to June, already running toward the barn. "I'll get the horses out." "Cole, know your shoulder." But he was already gone, plunging into the smoke-filled barn. June ran for buckets, her heart in her throat. Other ranch hands appeared, forming a bucket brigade, but June barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the barn door, waiting for Cole to emerge. He came out leading 2 terrified horses, coughing and smoke-blackened. Before June could stop him, he went back in. "Damn fool man," she muttered. Even as she organized the water brigade, the fire was too advanced to save the barn, but they could keep it from spreading to the house and other outbuildings. Cole emerged twice more with horses before June physically blocked him from going back. "That's all of them," she said firmly. "Don't you dare go back in there." He looked like he might argue, but then a section of the barn roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. If any animals were left inside, they were beyond help now. They fought the fire until dawn, when only smoking ruins remained of what had been a fine barn. June's hands were blistered, her throat raw from smoke, but all she cared about was that Cole was safe beside her. "Hutchinson," Cole said quietly, staring at the destruction. "We can't prove it," June pointed out wearily. "Don't need to. We both know the truth." He turned to look at her, his face streaked with soot and exhaustion. "June, maybe we should reconsider." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "This is exactly what he wants, to break us, make us run." She gestured at the smoking ruins. "It's just a barn. Cole, we can rebuild. What we can't do is let him win." "The horses are traumatized. We lost all the hay for winter. Most of our tools, but not each other." June took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "We didn't lose each other. Everything else can be replaced." Something shifted in Cole's expression. "When did you get so strong?" "When I married a man who taught me not to give up," June said simply. They were interrupted by approaching riders. June tensed, but relaxed when she recognized Marshal Harper with several deputies. "Saw the smoke from town," Harper said, surveying the damage. "This Hutchinson's work." "Can't prove it," Cole said tiredly. "Maybe not this specifically, but I've got enough on him for fraud and intimidation. He's being arrested as we speak." Harper's expression was grim. "Should have moved faster. I'm sorry about your barn." "We're alive," June said. "That's what matters." Harper nodded. "You folks need anything, you let me know. And don't worry about Hutchinson. Where he's going, he won't be bothering anyone for a long time." After the marshal left, June and Cole stood among their neighbors who'd come to help. Frank Morrison was already talking about organizing a barn raising. Mary was making lists of what they'd need. The community that Hutchinson had terrorized for so long was pulling together, stronger for having faced him down. "We did it," June said softly. "We actually won." "You did it," Cole corrected. "Your courage, your refusal to run, you saved us all." "June." "We saved each other," June insisted. "That's what partners do." As the sun rose over their scorched but unbroken ranch, June allowed herself a moment of pure relief. The fight was over. Hutchinson was finished. They could build their life now without looking over their shoulders. "So," she said, managing a tired smile, "ready to rebuild a barn?" Cole laughed, the sound rusty but real. "With you, I'm ready for anything." "Good." June leaned into him, feeling his arm come around her. "Because I was thinking, a bigger barn will need more room." "For what?" "For all the horses we're going to raise, and maybe—" She hesitated, then forged ahead. "Maybe a few children to help run this place someday." Cole's arm tightened around her. "Children," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "If you want," June said quickly. "I know we never discussed—" He silenced her with a kiss. tender and full of promise. "I want," he said against her lips, "I want everything with you, June Travern." Standing there among the ashes of what Hutchinson had tried to destroy, June felt hope bloom in her chest. They'd faced the worst and survived. Now it was time to build something beautiful from the ashes. "Then let's get started," she said. "We've got a life to build." And as their neighbors gathered around, offering help and hope, June knew they would succeed, because she'd learned the most important lesson of all: love wasn't just about two people. It was about community, about standing together against those who would tear you down. It was about choosing hope over fear, courage over comfort. Most of all, it was about never giving up, no matter how high the cost. And as Cole's hand found hers, strong and steady and sure, June knew they'd pay any price to protect what they'd built together. The barn could be rebuilt. Their love already had been, forged in fire and stronger for the testing. 3 months had passed since the fire, and spring was painting the Wyoming landscape in shades of green and gold. The new barn stood proudly where the old one had burned, raised by neighbors who'd come from miles around to help. It was larger than before, built with hope for the future rather than mere survival. June stood on the small rise overlooking the creek, watching the sun climb over the mountains. The land spread before her, 40 acres that had cost so much to keep, now officially transferred to her name with the railroad company's payment safely in the bank. But it wasn't the land that made her heart swell with contentment. It was the sight of Cole working with the horses in the corral below. His movements sure and strong, the shoulder injury now just a memory. She placed a hand on her still flat stomach, treasuring the secret she'd been holding for a week now. Doc Stevens had confirmed what she'd suspected. By Christmas, their family would grow from 2 to 3. She'd tell Cole tonight, after supper, when they sat by the fire as had become their cherished habit. Wool gathering again. June turned to find Mary Morrison approaching, basket in hand. The older woman had become like a mother to her these past months, filling the void left by her own mother's early death. "Just thinking," June said with a smile. "It's hard to believe sometimes. How much has changed?" Mary set down her basket and stood beside her, following her gaze to where Cole worked. "That man of yours looks happy. Haven't seen him smile so much in all the years I've known him." "He has reason to," June said softly. "We both do." "And more reason coming, unless I miss my guess," Mary said shrewdly, eyeing June's protective hand on her stomach. June blushed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been there herself 4 times over." Mary squeezed her arm. "Have you told him yet?" "Tonight, I wanted to be sure first. He'll be over the moon. That man looks at you like you hung the stars. June Travern. A baby will just about complete his happiness." They walked back to the house together, where June had been working on plans for the new addition Cole had suggested. With the railroad money and their combined efforts, the ranch was thriving. They could afford to expand, to build the kind of home meant for a family. "I brought fabric samples," Mary said, pulling squares of cloth from her basket. "Thought you might want to start planning the nursery." June fingered a soft yellow cotton, her heart full. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes, that I'm here, safe, with a home of my own and a man who loves me. 6 months ago, I was trapped in my uncle's house with no hope of escape." "Life has a way of surprising us," Mary agreed. "Sometimes the worst storms bring us to the best harbors." They spent the afternoon planning and dreaming, and June felt the deep contentment of a woman who'd found her place in the world. When Mary left, June began preparing supper, humming as she worked. She'd made Cole's favorite beef stew with the herbs she'd grown in her kitchen garden. She was just setting the table when she heard his boots on the porch. Her heart still skipped when he came home to her. This man who'd offered her shelter from a storm and become her whole world. "Smells wonderful in here," Cole said, hanging his hat by the door. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms for a kiss that was both greeting and promise. "How was your day?" Mary came by, We planned the addition. June leaned into his embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sunshine. How are the new horses? Coming along. That mare you gentled is going to make someone a fine mount. He pulled back to look at her, and June saw the question in his eyes. She'd been quiet lately, holding her secret close, and he'd noticed. Supper first, she said. Then we need to talk. A flicker of worry crossed his face, but he nodded, trusting her as he always did. They ate companionably, discussing the ranch business, the upcoming cattle drive, the news from town that Hutchinson had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for his crimes. When the dishes were done and they'd settled by the fire, Cole took her hand. All right, what's on your mind? June took a breath, suddenly nervous. They'd talked about children in abstract terms, but this was real, immediate. I went to see Doc Stevens last week. Cole's hand tightened on hers. Are you ill, June? If something's wrong... Nothing's wrong. She smiled at his concern. Everything's right. Actually, Cole, we're going to have a baby. Around Christmas. Doc thinks... For a moment, Cole just stared at her, his face blank with shock. Then joy dawned like sunrise over mountains, transforming his features into something almost boyish. A baby, he breathed. Our baby. You're sure? I'm sure. June laughed as he pulled her onto his lap, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. June Travern, you've just made me the happiest man in Wyoming. Hell, the happiest man in the whole territory. He kissed her deeply, then pulled back, sudden worry creasing his brow. Should you be working so hard, do you need to rest? Should I? I'm fine, June assured him, loving him even more for his concern. Doc says I'm healthy as a horse. I can keep doing everything I've been doing for months yet. A baby, Cole said again, wonder in his voice. His hand moved to rest gently on her stomach. Our child, growing right here. June, I never imagined I'd have this, a wife, a child, a real home. You've given me the same gifts, June reminded him. A year ago, I was nobody, just Silas Whitaker's unwanted niece, a burden to be sold to the highest bidder. Now I'm June Travern, rancher's wife, soon-to-be mother. You gave me that. Cole, you gave me myself. You were always yourself, Cole said firmly. I just gave you room to grow. They sat in comfortable silence, Cole's hand protective over where their child grew. June's head on his shoulder. The fire crackled peacefully, and outside, the spring evening settled soft over their land. We'll need to think of names, June said eventually. Samuel for a boy, Cole said immediately. After the man who gave me my start, the one who helped my mother. Samuel Travern, June tested. I like it. And for a girl, you choose. June thought of her mother, taken too soon but never forgotten. Rose, after my mother. Rose Travern. Cole smiled. Beautiful, like her mother. As the evening deepened, they made plans. The new addition would include a proper nursery. They'd need to hire more hands as the ranch grew, especially with June needing to rest more as her time approached. There was so much to do, so much to prepare for. But for now, they were content to sit together, dreaming of the future they were building. The fire burned low as they talked, planning a life that would have seemed impossible just months before. Finally, Cole stood, pulling June to her feet. Come on, mother-to-be, you need your rest. As they prepared for bed, June paused by the window, looking out at their land bathed in moonlight. Tomorrow, Cole would start building a small wooden house on the hill overlooking the creek. Not for them, but as she'd mentioned, for the foreman they'd need to hire as the ranch expanded. It was Cole's idea to build it near the spot where June liked to stand and think. So you'll always have a place that's yours, he'd said. where you can see everything we've built together. Now, getting into bed beside her husband, June marveled at how far they'd come. That desperate girl who'd stolen a kiss in a storm seemed like someone from another life. She'd been running from captivity, from a fate worse than death. She'd found not just shelter, but love. Not just safety, but purpose. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, pulling her close. "About doors," June said with a smile. "And locks." "Oh, that first night, when you locked the door to keep me safe, I thought I was trading one prison for another. I didn't understand yet." "Understand what?" June turned in his arms to face him. "That the best locks are the ones we choose. The ones that keep the world out so we can build something beautiful inside." Cole kissed her forehead. "No more locked doors between us." "No," June agreed. "But I was thinking—" She traced patterns on his chest, suddenly shy. "That new little house on the hill? It should have a good strong lock. Planning to hide up there when the baby keeps us up all night?" June laughed. "No, but someday, when our children are old enough to ask about how we met, I want to show them. I want to say, 'Your father built this house on the spot where I stood and chose to fight for our future.' And see that lock. That's to remind us that the best kind of safety is the kind we make for ourselves." Cole was quiet for a long moment, then pulled her closer. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only a dozen times." "Not nearly enough then." He tilted her chin up for a kiss. "I love you, June Travern, you and this little one both." As sleep claimed them, June thought about the journey that had brought them here. A desperate flight through a storm, a kiss born of fear, a marriage of convenience that had become a love story. They'd faced down enemies, survived attacks, rebuilt from ashes, and through it all, they'd chosen each other. Again and again. The new house on the hill would have a lock, yes, but it would be different from the one that had first sheltered her. This one wouldn't be about keeping her in or the world out. It would be about choosing safety, choosing love, choosing to build something worth protecting. As June drifted off to sleep, safe in Cole's arms with their child growing beneath her heart, she smiled. That girl who'd fled into the storm seeking nothing more than escape had found so much more. She'd found home. She'd found love. She'd found herself. And in a small wooden house on a hill overlooking their thriving ranch, she'd hang a lock that told their story, not of captivity but of choice, not of fear but of freedom, not of endings but of beginnings. The girl who'd stolen one kiss in a storm had become a woman who'd stolen a good man's heart. And in return, he'd given her the world, a world bounded not by locked doors but by endless possibilities, by love that grew stronger with each passing season, by the promise of children who would inherit not just land but legacy. It was more than enough. It was everything. And it all began with a storm, a kiss, and a door locked not to imprison, but to protect. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed June and Cole's journey from that fateful storm to their happy ending. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and give this video a like. And don't forget to hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and adventure in the American frontier. Until next time, keep riding toward your own sunset